What's up, everyone? Back for another episode of Locked On Bucks, and Milwaukee start the preseason with a loss, which begs the question: is the club in crisis? We're going to break that. We're going to break down the first game for MarJon Beauchamp with the Bucks. There was no Giannis in this game, but a few interesting talking points. Jordan Nwora started the game, and potentially some interesting comments from associate head coach Charles Lee as well. So we're going to break down the loss to Memphis now. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday. Also find my other stuff over at ESPN alongside me, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden, for today's episode that is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Of course, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen or watch of every day. I was traveling yesterday, so the post-game show, that's my fault. A little bit slower than usual, but now that basketball's back, you can expect the post-game podcast typically to be up pretty quickly. Frank, they lost 107-102 to the Grizzlies. They were really leading a very, very heavily undermanned Memphis team until really the benches were emptied in the fourth quarter. Certainly from a Bucks point of view, there's a bit to talk about, but perhaps the guy we were most interested in watching was MarJon Beauchamp. 4 points, 6 rebounds, couple steals, a block. I would say a difficult first few minutes on the floor. Maybe he was a bit overexcited, maybe a bit anxious, but what did you take away from MarJon Beauchamp, first player off the bench, not surprisingly replacing Jordan Nwora?
Yeah, I think that matchup in terms of the battle for wing minutes between Beauchamp and Nwora, to me that was the main thing I am kind of going to be watching here in these first couple of preseason games, and especially with Giannis out on Saturday night, we knew obviously this was going to be a kind of makeshift group, and was nice to see, hey, Brook Lopez is healthy. Hey, Drew Holiday's healthy. Hey, George Hill's out there, looking fine, right? They're not seemingly too worried about being too careful with some of those veterans. So of course the focus goes on to the younger guys who are battling for minutes. And, as you said, a tough start to the game for MarJon. I think in the first 2 minutes and 30 seconds, he had 2 missed shots and 2 turnovers. And, I kind of reading some of the post-game comments, admitted he kind of had, some of those sort of first game jitters, probably some butterflies, just, again, preseason, but his first game wearing a real Milwaukee Bucks jersey, not the Summer League jersey. And yeah, had a couple, had some decent looks from three, wasn't able to knock any of those down. And of course, we've talked about how that's really going to be kind of the main thing that he's going to have to do offensively, because I think we saw, he just has limitations, I think, right now. And, I don't know how high his ceiling is from like a dribble pass perspective. He had a turnover inbounding the ball on a bad pass, got stripped a couple times. 4 turnovers for a guy that obviously is not playing on the ball very much, isn't great. And so I think expectations just need to be calibrated appropriately, that his role in offense just needs to be very limited, because again, going in, like we saw him get a couple like pick and rolls, dribble handoffs, and just doesn't get to strike me as a guy that looks very comfortable doing that right now. I thought there was one play in the first half when he got fouled where he attacked a closeout, and you got to see a little bit of the kind of athleticism and physical tool set, kind of what that could mean offensively in terms of attacking the basket. And he was a really efficient kind of garbage man, paint scorer in the G League last year. And we really didn't see much of that in Vegas. So, some of the things I'm looking for in preseason is almost like to kind of confirm some of the strengths that seemed to be there last year in Vegas. I mean, he scored 15 points that weren't there in Vegas, that 15 points per game in the G League without really shooting many threes or shooting them very well. But he was a guy that, managed to score in transition, get putbacks. We saw him have one very nice offensive rebound in the first half of this game where he really kind of jumped everybody, and then kicked it out. And I think the other thing that we saw, kind of positive was his one basket was a transition basket where he ends up jumping off 1 foot for a really nice dunk in transition. And we talked during Vegas about how he seemed hesitant at times to go off of 1 foot in transition. And I think there were about 3 plays where it seemed like he felt like he had to slow down and go off 2 feet to try to finish in transition. And I think one of those times he got stripped, another couple times he got fouled. And again, if you're just running at top speed, able to jump off 1 foot, and that gives you kind of your best chance to finish. And it didn't seem like he was comfortable doing that. So it was really nice to see him, get that first basket out of the way. And even though it's a dunk and it's like, okay, well, great, you get like basically a transition dunk. Like how significant can that be? At least it was encouraging to see him kind of playing with speed and tempo in the open court and showing off some of the athleticism that I think we were assuming would be there, and obviously is going to be really important. So offensively, I think very much probably going to be a work in progress, and if he's not making threes, then it's going to be probably a bit of a challenge unless he really can carve out a bit more of that sort of off ball cutting, rebounding, kind of again transition sort of garbage man thing, which again last year it seemed like he did in the G League. We haven't really seen much evidence of that so far, but I think defensively that obviously we've talked about his bar and how he doesn't need to do a whole lot on offense to potentially get minutes, and that's because of what he can do defensively. And also in the G League last year, he was kind of a defensive playmaker. I think he had about 2.5 blocks plus steals per game, and again didn't see a lot of that in Vegas, but in this game, a couple steals, again just seemed to be around the ball, deflections, and had a really nice block, kind of moving backwards against a guy driving right at him, ends up getting a piece of it, knocking the ball away. And again, defensively, it just seemed like he was around the ball. I don't know that we saw a lot of, kind of ISO one-on-one type situations. I think he may have some challenges getting over screens. Again, he's not a small guy, but certainly that's the end where, he's going to have to really establish himself. And in a matchup, hypothetically, with Jordan Nwora for early season minutes, that's obviously the area that he can distinguish himself a bit. So, I think this is a game you say he kind of got it out of the way, first preseason game under the books. And, hopefully he shows a little bit more calmness and a little more composure offensively moving forward and can just knock down some shots, because I thought that was one of the other things was like, he's going to be parking the corner a lot when he's in games this year, and he's going to be open a lot is what I expect. Drew Holiday was looking for him repeatedly. And again, when defenses were sagging, he was often the guy that was open. So it's not going to be, his failure is not going to be for lack of open shots. Let's say that. And now it's just coming down to whether he can hit enough of those to keep defenses honest.
Yeah, we saw a little bit of it in Vegas as well, but it does feel like the majority of his offense or limited scoring that he's going to bring to the table is going to come off or come in transition. He had another strip where he kind of stripped the ball on a Memphis player driving to the basket, and he sort of gambled that they were going to collect the ball, and then they ended up getting it back, but that would have been more points for him as well. And the other thing is, I do think that will be more open when Giannis is on the floor, and potentially Chris as well. He had one of his 3-point attempts blocked, which maybe he could have faked and put the ball on the floor, as he did in the second quarter when he was able to draw a foul there, and looked like he was going to actually attempt to dunk from outside the key. It was a pretty ambitious attempt there, but that was fun to see, because for all the talk of how athletic he was, he kind of it was like a funny athlete in Vegas, but I thought he showed a little bit today. I want to get to Jordan Nwora after we talk about LinkedIn a little bit more, and LinkedIn's jumped on board, and these days every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I'm on LinkedIn, Frank. People can send. No, actually, I'm not going to say that. Don't send me a message on LinkedIn, but unless it's job related. But LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply there. What about the other guy? Should we talk about Jordan Nwora then? So he gets the start. a week ago, we're like, is this guy even going to be on the roster? Now he starts in the preseason opener. As we mentioned, no Wes Matthews, no Giannis, no Chris Middleton. So it's a little bit different. And then, Brook Lopez and Drew Holiday played only the first half in this game. But along with Beauchamp, who played basically 27 minutes, Nwora played 27, 21 points, 8 rebounds, 7 for 15 from the floor. As we know, as we've seen before, when Jordan Nwora is playing in these lineups that are deep in the rotation, shall we say, he's probably going to score, but he's most certainly going to get shots up. Did you see anything from Jordan Nwora that we haven't seen before?
Not really.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Someone had to take shots tonight.
Yeah, it's not to knock him at all, but
yeah,
we have seen this.
Yeah, I nearly tweeted something about how Jordan Nwora was already in preseason form. I'm not sure if that would have been a joke that would have caught people off guard, but not trying to diss Jordan, but we sort of expect him to look good in these types of environments in preseason, and scenarios where he's going to have the ball in his hands a fair bit. But he was obviously part of that lineup that kind of struggled down the stretch and kind of coughed away the game, and ball was obviously in his hands a lot because how are you going to be running offense when it's him and who else was out there at the time? I think it was Lindell Wigginton, and I think AJ Green might have been out there for a bit. Beauchamp was out there for a bit. Bildoza was out there for a bit. And Thanasis was out there. And again, it's obviously the ball's going to be in Jordan's hands a fair bit. And so, I think he is who he is until further notice, I would say. And obviously there's some positives with that in terms of, the shot creation, and 21 points on 15 shots. For a first preseason game, a lot of other guys were worse. I thought it was interesting. I thought, Grayson Allen, looked pretty sharp in the first half. And then I looked at his box score and he was 15 points on 6 out of 14. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess he wasn't actually that efficient, but I think he did stuff that we've seen Grayson Allen do. And I don't know. It seemed like people were I saw some people kind of reacting to this like it was some, new and like determined Grayson Allen or something like that. And it's like, no, he kind of did that kind of stuff for a lot of the year, right? I mean, he looked awesome against the Bulls in the first round, right? And it really was just in that second round where sort of the wheels kind of completely came off for him. So, yeah, I mean, kind of like when we were talking about Giannis and Thanasis at Eurobasket, most important thing is just get through these games without taking any injuries. And, I think seems like certainly game one, you were able to get through it. Not a very impressive end of the game, get outscored 41-26 in the fourth quarter, but obviously doesn't really matter a whole lot. And, I think Jordan and Mamu as well, 15 points on 11 shots for Mamu. He was out there obviously late as well. They kind of did stuff that, offensively they showed kind of the skills that they have. And so it's not a bad thing that they, scored points in a preseason game, but by the same token, we know that they're going to have to do more than that. And I don't think we saw some sort of, breakthrough defensively from either of those guys. And obviously, look at kind of the box score is -11 for Mamu. Jordan was still a +2. I think MarJon Beauchamp was a game worst -18. So some of the young guys, let's say the game tilted when the Bucks went very young. Wigginton was -13. Thanasis -16, as I mentioned, Mamu -11. So it is what it is, right? Let's not read too much into a preseason game. But I think we'll get a little bit of sample size here over the next couple of weeks just to see if there's anything appreciably different with those guys. And for better or worse, we're going to see some of that in the regular season as well. Because at this point, we're not expecting Chris Middleton to be back for the start of the season. And I don't really know. It's kind of one of those things I hadn't really thought of Chris being out for long, but we're now season's pretty close, right? We're like 2.5 weeks away, something like that, less than 3 weeks away from the start of the regular season. And, Chris it's not like he's like practicing yet or anything like that, right? He's got the cast off, starting to do some work, but obviously he's got a little ways to go before he's back. And you don't expect the Bucks to take any chances with him either, given the importance of having him healthy when they need him most, which obviously was arguably the reason that they went out in the second round last year. So so we'll see, but kind of check the box, game one in the books, and obviously these next couple of games will be a bit different, being 2 games very, very far from home in Abu Dhabi.
So I should mention, obviously, Pat wasn't playing as well, another one of those guys. So I will say, considering some of the veterans they had on this team, certainly compared to Memphis. I mean, Memphis had no one playing in this game, and you still had Brook Lopez and Drew Holiday and Grayson Allen starting, Bobby Portis as well. Then you had George Hill coming off the bench. So, as far as preseason openers going, they had some real experience, and they still had those 5 guys that you think are going to come in. So it certainly is a deep team, and that's probably why, again, like you said, I don't think it's not knocking Jordan Nwora. I mean, he scored 21 points. It was fine. But I think it's going to be more curious when all those guys are back. What are the things that are going to get him minutes? So it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, it was fascinating that he got the start. Serge Ibaka played decent minutes in this one as well. So is there anything else from this game that you looked at, or potentially that you didn't see, that you'd be looking for in these 2 games? And again, I don't know what these games are going to be like in Abu Dhabi. I don't know who's going to play. I don't know what they're going to do. I assume Bud's not traveling. I don't know if that's confirmed or not, but Charles Lee obviously took these games. So after having 1 game in the preseason, it feels like this is going to be a little bit disjointed now. But overall, you think last year Brook was obviously not in good shape entering the season. Drew Holiday had come off the late season, the Olympics. So I guess from a freshness point of view, it at least feels like potentially some of the guys are coming in better shape.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd be surprised if Bud is not on the trip with them, right? I mean,
was he at the arena? I didn't see him.
He was. Well,
okay.
I think he came in before Charles Lee had his media availability, and basically, I think he said, "Give him hell." So, and our friend Eric Name wrote
and then scooted off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think he was on crutches instead of the scooter, I believe, today. So, I mean, I would certainly expect him to go with the team to Abu Dhabi. I mean, just given the importance from like a team building perspective, whether or not he's on the sidelines, who knows, right? Potentially a lot of disappointed fans in Abu Dhabi who came to see the Milwaukee Bucks with Bud in his half zip sweater on the sideline. So, I'm sure the NBA is going to be really leaning on Bud to make an appearance on the sideline. But
by the way, let me jump in with one quick take I've got. When we spoke about this in Summer League, AJ Green, not sure why.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, Luka Vildoza and AJ Green, like, it's funny looking back. I think there were these translated articles from Luka Vildoza's agent. Remember that during the summer when he got released and then re-signed, and it was like, oh no, the Bucks really want him on the team and he's gonna be back. And it's just like, sorry, Luka, thanks for playing, but there are no rosters. There's 15 guaranteed roster spots. It's over, like unless they gave like him one of the 2 ways or something, but I don't really kind of see that. So I'd just say we'll always have that one around the back pass in the Bulls series.
It was beautiful
to Thanasis, but Luka Vildoza, thanks for playing, and I agree. AJ Green, like I just don't get. I mean, we've talked about it, like kind of. I don't want to be a broken record. 1 out of 5 from 3 tonight. 1 out of 5 overall in 12 minutes. I just don't get really why you take a flyer on a 2-way with a guy like this in the first place, just given you are a championship contender. Under, granted, the odds of finding a guy on a 2-way that, would give you real rotation minutes or be valuable or develop into something obviously is not high. But at a minimum, I would be targeting player types that at least have a chance to be an impact, right?
Right.
And AJ Green, I mean, 6'4" guy who probably can never play NBA defense. It's like, I mean, he can be a great shooter, but what does that really get you, right? Like, I just don't see any path for him to be a guy that matters for the Bucks. And okay, like, so I mean, what's the thesis here? Is you need a shooter on the hurt or something like that? I don't know, right? I mean, it's a 2-way spot like that. I don't think you can just be sort of punting on these or taking guys that have no shot of giving you NBA minutes. So I agree. I don't really get it. And Lindell Wigginton, he was obviously much better in summer league than AJ Green was. Maybe we know enough of Lindell Wigginton from last year to say like, well, he's he's not going to be a guy that is ever really going to matter in the NBA either. But I think he's certainly shown more than what I expect AJ Green can show, just from a kind of just athletic tool set standpoint and just sort of positional utility standpoint. So yeah, I don't know. Take your pick. Who might be another sort of two-way option? But I agree. I'm still kind of confused why AJ Green got one of the two ways. And the upside is you can kind of cycle those two-way guys in pretty easily. So I don't know. I'd be fascinated to hear just fly on the wall. Like, are the Bucks? How tenuous or strong is his grasp on that spot? Are they committed to giving him 30 games or something like that and seeing kind of what they have, or is he in camp basically having to prove it? And if he doesn't look really good, then they've already got sort of other ideas of what they could do at that spot. So yeah, I would certainly bet that AJ Green is not going to be on a two-way by mid-season. Would be my speculation. They'll cycle that spot into somebody else, and again, not to kind of just rag on AJ Green, who's I'm sure a lovely guy. But yeah, I agree. I just don't really get the thinking behind that. I mean, Matt Thomas is probably available somewhere if you just want, kind of an undersized guy that can't play defense and is awesome at shooting 3-pointers. And Matt Thomas is from Wisconsin, so there you go. There's your connection. If you want to make people happy on that. I don't know if he's two-way eligible anymore. But long story short, yeah, don't get it and assume there'll be some movement on that at some point.
Well, it's that's not a bad name that you dropped there, Matt Thomas. There's a perfect example of a guy that we've literally seen hit 4 or 5 threes in quick time in the NBA, but ultimately he's not really an NBA player. So that's why it's a little confusing. Like if you're using the two-way player to maybe find a diamond in the rough, it just doesn't seem like this is the case. It feels like if they want him for the herd, they could probably just sign him and keep him on the herd. It's but anyway, on the grand scheme of things, it's probably not the biggest issue. But you said you wouldn't bet on AJ Green. So what about betonline.net? I don't know whether they have those odds. I would bet that they probably don't. But betonline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Even I woke up this morning here, back home, finally not in a hotel, loving that life. But I caught the end of the Packers game. And you can find odds for the Green Bay Packers at betonline.net. It feels like they're just going at the moment, but you can get later player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And, of course, NBA as well. NBA Futures, NBA Championship, Defensive Player of the Year, MVP, Rookie of the Year. All those types of things are there if you're interested in having a look where the Bucks stand there in the lines. It's also the fastest and easiest way to check in on other games and events, including baseball, boxing, golf, MMA. So head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Frank, was there anything from post-game? Charles Lee. I know Eric mentioned to us what an interesting comment from Charles Lee. And then you kind of brought this up, which I think is a pretty good point. I think we've all learned by now that when Bud is doing press conferences, you're probably not going to be getting too much inside info. Even if he's annoyed about something, he might pretend that he's not. He plays with a very, very, very straight bet, old Mikey Budenholzer. But when you get Charles Lee, sometimes you might have an opportunity to catch them off guard. Now, Charles Lee's been around for a long time, but he mentioned something about the three-point shooting, or certainly the three-point defense, which is good timing because we discussed this for an entire podcast last week if everyone wants to go back and listen to that. But did you see anything different, even though obviously you're missing some significant defensive pieces from this team?
I don't think I saw anything to suggest that, like big tactical changes, but I think to your point, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but essentially he said something effective that they are trying to make a point of emphasis of not giving up as many threes, which, game 1 of preseason,
success, 28.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I'm going to put a whole lot of stock into that. But as you alluded to, right, when you have an assistant who's put in the spot of doing the pre and post game, normally don't ever hear anything from Charles Lee on the record. So this was a bit unique. We obviously had the situation last year with Darvin Ham where he coached those couple games. And we got to see Darvin, in front of the cameras. And, I think he's obviously they're all different. These are all different people. So they're all going to approach the media a little bit differently. So I don't think there's anything, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that put money on the Bucks, being appreciably better in terms of allowing threes because all these things come with trade-offs. But just something to kind of monitor. And certainly if early in the season, if they are doing things a little differently, maybe they're not helping as much, who knows? Maybe that's sort of a leading indicator of that little nugget that Charles Lee dropped on us. But obviously, a lot of the post game was sort of just, Taylor Jenkins, who worked with Charles in both Atlanta and Milwaukee, so was a maybe a fitting opposing coach to go up against here. Just a lot of people lavishing praise on Charles and his pedigree as a coach and what he's been able to accomplish so far. And we've obviously seen him interview for a number of head coaching positions already. So I think certainly the chorus from post game was about how it's just a matter of time before he's a head coach somewhere. And obviously, hopefully he can win another championship in Milwaukee before then. And but that's just the reality of being a coach who has success and develops coaching talent, right? I think Mike Budenholzer deserves a lot of credit. We obviously cross our fingers here, and not that I'm like rooting for the Lakers, but I feel like I have to root for Darvin Ham in LA, getting his chance after a long time as an assistant. And we've obviously seen a number of other guys who have come from that Bud coaching tree. Probably most notably Quinn Snyder and Kenny Atkinson, and of course Taylor Jenkins. All three of those guys having been head coaches recently that have had a fair bit of success. So hopefully for Charles' sake, he's going to be next in line, and hopefully he ends up in a good situation somewhere and has a chance to show people what he can do as a head coach. And hopefully for the Bucks, they continue to develop the next Darvin Ham, the next Charles Lee, etc. on the bench. And again, it's kind of occupational hazard when you're really good at being a head coach that and developing assistant coaches that you're going to lose some, and then you got to find new guys and bring them along. But obviously Bud has been doing that for years now, going back to his Atlanta days with some of the guys we mentioned. So thankfully we've got Charles at least this season, and then I think next summer we'll see what's next for him and for the Bucks.
So one thing that did throw me off was when they put up the coaching win-loss records of Bud next to Taylor Jenkins. It completely threw me off that Taylor Jenkins was like 128 and 99. So he's entering his fourth season. I thought he'd only been there 2. So anyway, I know these seasons have been compressed, but that feels like that's gone very quickly. The next game is on Thursday, I believe 11 a.m. I think is tip-off on Thursday.
Central. I believe that is correct.
Time. Well, we've just moved into daylight savings time here in Australia, so I had to figure out what time we were going to podcast. We've separated another hour, but that's 3 a.m. for me. So, preseason basketball at 3 a.m. Eurobasket was one thing, but preseason is really, really stretching things. Hey, I got one question for you that you might have caught that I couldn't quite understand, or I missed it, or I just caught the end of the conversation. So Zora was talking about, great to see Zora Stevenson back, by the way, and shout out to Dave Kane as well, doing the TV broadcast. Thought he did a good job. But Zora brought up something about the taunting rules or the delay of game or something, standing on the bench. Did you catch that conversation at all? That they've changed the rule or something?
Yeah, I think they were talking, was it in reference to Giannis? I think was he standing up?
Eating popcorn or trying to hail down one of the other vendors in the arena, I think.
Yeah, Giannis was, we had a lot of video of him eating popcorn during this game, and then he was next to the scores table later in the game, and he used that, telescoping arm to steal some Skittles. So
tomorrow's podcast, is there an issue with Giannis's diet? Make sure you tune in tomorrow.
Let's just say, we have ample evidence that, let's just say this: Giannis is not on the strictest diet, and among many God-given talents
That's right.
is the fact that Giannis's metabolism seems capable of allowing
Yes.
him to, not necessarily have to eat the way that maybe some people have to eat to stay in shape. But I believe it was in reference to Giannis, and they made Giannis sit down. And I think I actually heard another podcast recently talking about. I think it was the Mavericks. Like this is like a Maverick, like it was somewhat inspired by the
Yeah.
Mavericks
Okay.
not sitting down during the playoffs last year on the bench. And obviously, if you're a fan paying a large amount to sit behind the Mavericks, especially if the Mavericks are the road team and you're not there to see the Mavericks, and they're standing up and blocking your view of the court, not great. Not really, not a great fan experience. I think Theo Pinson was highlighted as the the leader of the Mavericks standing room only approach to the bench. So yes, I think that there is some rule now about delay of game, or some way that they can kind of keep those benches honest, so that the bench mob is not just loitering around blocking everybody's view on the sideline the entire game. So we'll see. We didn't get a transition take foul call in this game. Giannis being on the bench, obviously, maybe part of the reason why the Memphis Grizzlies did not feel obligated to try to take any transition take fouls in this game. Um, but yeah, we'll see with every preseason / early season. It's always interesting to see kind of what are the new points of emphasis from an officiating standpoint. So we got one very boring one, I guess, this time around.
Yeah, we will see. But it's interesting during preseason. Sometimes you get the opportunity to see some new players that you think might break out. And if you're playing fantasy basketball, you should check out the Locked On Fantasy podcast with Josh Lloyd, my Aussie mate. Does a fantastic job on that podcast. They do ridiculous numbers. So after you're done listening to Locked On Bucks, listen to Locked On Fantasy Basketball, and you'll give yourself a chance to win whatever league you're in. But we're away, Frank. Basketball is back. Not sure whether it was a long or short preseason. I think Eurobasket filled the void and certainly helped us out for a few weeks there. But like I said, Thursday, the Bucks will be back in preseason basketball. I seen on the broadcast yesterday they had the countdown. It was 16 days, so I suppose we're 15 days from opening night as well, and it's when the real fun will begin. But I must admit, it was nice to see Firesafe Forum. It was nice to hear some familiar voices. Not so familiar faces necessarily on the court at times, but I'm glad it's back. Frank. I'm excited.
I mean, what unfamiliar faces did you see on the court? We got this, we Bucks may be missing some guys, but come on, I mean, this is pretty much all dudes we've seen here for last year. Kane, were there AJ Green, MarJon Beauchamp? Was there anybody? Is there anybody else? Marcus Bolden, I guess, played. Was there anybody else that was an unfamiliar face to us in this game?
Most of the Memphis roster.
Yeah, well, okay, Memphis roster. Yeah.
I didn't know who those guys were, but they got the win. So shout out to the Grizz. All right, let's leave it there. We'll podcast tomorrow. Find something to talk about then. Probably not about Giannis's diet, but
probably not about the Milwaukee Brewers either.
Oh boy.
Nobody with worse vibes in the state of Wisconsin right now than the Milwaukee Brewers. Stick a fork in the Brewers, it looks like. And if somehow I'm reverse jinxing them, great. But yeah, good. I tweeted, I'm not sure if I'm more excited for the Bucks season starting or the Brewers season ending, because it's just been a drag, man. But Brewers have just been a drag here for the past couple months. So
you hate to see it. You hate to see it.
Giannis's baseball team. Ownership. Big questions about ownership. Brewers ownership. So Giannis, you're gonna have to ask Giannis some hard-hitting questions about his tenure as Brewers owner and being disappointing this year. I'm sure he's got some really detailed talking points for that.
Well, he looked frustrated and upset today on the bench. So, all right. See you all tomorrow.